Some cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin aren't backed by anything but hype. But stablecoins are different. They claim to be pegged to a fixed asset, like the dollar. One stablecoin is supposedly backed up by $1 or a dollar equivalent. Even though boosters claim that stablecoins represent the future of the payment system, they aren't really being used to pay for real-world goods and services. Even so, stablecoins have taken off. Their market cap is now 35 times bigger than it was just 2 years ago. And instead of being used to pay for goods and services, those billions of dollars worth of stablecoins are used to lubricate speculation in the shadiest part of the crypto ecosystem, where people are lending, trading, and leveraging with no laws and no sheriff anywhere. The President's Working Group on Financial Markets recently identified a long list of risks posed by stablecoins: run risk, payment system risk, concentrated economic power, illicit finance, investor protection. Or to state that in slightly fancy, less fancy terms, it found that stablecoins run the risk of helping cheaters steal people's money, financing terrorism, cyber attack, ransoms, and the drug trade, causing a run on the financial system like we saw in 2008, and allowing big stablecoin users to dominate markets and harm consumers. Now, Secretary Liang, do you agree that these kinds of risks mean that stablecoins are not just an emerging threat to our financial system, but a threat that could become systemic if this market continues to grow rapidly?
So, Senator Warren, thank you for the question. So I do think there is some urgency to considering stablecoins and applying the appropriate regulations to reduce run risk and the potential for them to scale up quickly.
So are you, just let me remind you what my question is. Do they pose the threat of becoming a systemic risk?
Of becoming a systemic risk, yes.
Yes, they do. I agree that the stablecoin market poses significant risks and that Congress and our regulators need to contain these risks. And that is where you come in. You advise the Financial Stability Oversight Council, FSOC, and you sometimes sit in these meetings as Secretary Yellen's substitute. FSOC's job, according to Treasury's website, is, quote, identifying emerging threats to financial stability and coordinate regulatory actions to address them, end quote. So, under Secretary Liang, if you believe that stablecoins are a serious emerging threat to our financial system, then have you advised FSOC to use the tools that Congress gave it specifically to mitigate threats before they get out of hand?
So FSOC, as you say, has the responsibility to identify risks to financial stability. It is discussing these issues. It does convene the regulators. They have been discussing consumer protection and investor protection, illicit finance, and taking steps to assess what risks and what authorities regulators have. The PWG was recommended, which is a subset of the FSOC with most tangible interests, to assess whether there are existing regulatory gaps, however, in assessing to address the risks of stablecoins as a use for payments, and identified some gaps and made some recommendations.
So you are moving at least in that direction? Is that what you're telling me? I want to make sure I just understand your testimony here today.
Yes, the PWG is making recommendations, and they complement the existing authorities that regulators have. Well, the SEC, the CFTC, and the banking regulators are issuing guidance carefully about how banks should
I understand about the other regulators. Mm-hmm. I'm asking about FSOC because I don't want monitoring to be a way to just avoid doing your job. In your testimony before the House Financial Services last week, you suggested that FSOC should not and would not act ahead of Congress. That's something the crypto industry might find comforting, but it is not consistent with FSOC's mission. Did you misstate something last week?
So I what I intended to say, I didn't see that, is FSOC has a responsibility to look at the tools it has.
Well, not just
and
to
whether
look, but to
they
use.
can apply. And the situation is developing very quickly. And so how different tools would apply, it's a bit difficult to prejudge how they would be used.
Okay, but you are willing to use them ahead of Congress?
If that is the case and it is assessed that they are a systemic risk that needs to be addressed.
Well, not that they are a systemic risk. Remember what it says on the website, before that risk has reached fruition. You know, I worry that you're approaching the crypto market with blinders on. You talk a lot about the benefits of stablecoins, benefits that have been promised for years and that have still not materialized. And all the while, you are not talking about the risks that are flashing bright red in our faces here. Congress needs to put guardrails around crypto, and I'm writing a bill to do just that. But there's no reason to delay. Pointing a finger at Congress does not give you or FSOC the right to ignore your current statutory responsibilities.
I think as we look at this, we should be just particularly careful to accommodate the great potential that this shows, to recognize that we want to keep America a competitive market, that's in the interest of our economic security. We also need to take our national security interest into account. But I hope that we do so in a way that it continues to make America a desired jurisdiction to do this, rather than pushing this activity, which is very jurisdictionally movable. We'd rather do it here than push it to another market where we would have much less control and visibility on it.
So I would agree with your comment, and stable coins that are stable coins, tied to the U.S. dollar that are stable, I think would be an important component of preserving a global reserve currency.
Could you please restate briefly what are the principal risks that you assess to be posed by the growth of the stablecoin market?
So briefly, stablecoins have been growing, and their potential to be used for payments in the ordinary world, the non-crypto world, has been increasing. So the risks that we included and identified in the PWG report are, one, the risks that investors could run on a stablecoin, perhaps because investors lose confidence in the value of the assets that are behind it. Two, the risks of disruptions to the payment system if the operations are not held to standards that ensure that payments can be made as promised. And then third, the increased risk from higher market concentration if some stablecoins were to scale up very quickly and increase market share. So those are the three risks that were identified in the PWG report, for which the PWG believed current regulations do not address.